Welcome to the No Limit Selling Podcast, where industry leaders share their advice on how you can become better, stronger, faster. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. And as you know, one of my fascinations is the mindset and the tricks it plays. And sometimes the tricks are really amazing and they allow us to go out and do phenomenal things. I was chatting with a friend who, when they first started, they said, make these calls, get appointments with CEOs. And they said, not a problem. And they started landing appointments right out of the gate. And the coworkers like, how are you doing that? They don't want to talk to you. She said, after 2 months of that, I couldn't pick up the phone ever again. So we can have a positive mindset. We can also have a negative one. And today we have the privilege of having Anthony Iannarino with us today. He's got a book coming out, The Negativity Fast. Anthony, welcome to the show.
It's good to see you again. Even though it's better to see you face to face in Vegas.
Yeah, it was. We went. It was a Sales 3.0 conference. Shout out to our friends at Selling Power and Gerhardt. It was a great group of people coming together, sharing ideas how to do better in sales and how to do better as human beings.
True. Yeah, I thought it was a great session there.
Because I think one of the things that humans do exceptionally well is creativity. I'd heard a long time ago, you probably heard it too, like we're made in the likeness of God and we all look different. And I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. But the one thing God does is create stuff. And that's where we're at the highest. And there's a quote from David Lynch, I think it's negativity is the enemy of creativity. And creativity is how we solve problems. So you've written many books, Anthony. What made you decide to write this one about that negativity that's in all our lives?
It was time. I mean, this is, if there's ever the time for us to have this conversation, it's definitely right now. You've got a hot war in Europe right now. We've got the highest inflation in, 40 years-ish, something like that. You've got interest rates, you've got political divisiveness, and we could go on and on and on about all of the struggles and problems that we have right now. So this is just a particularly interesting time. Post-pandemic, you'd think that people were feeling better, but it doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like there's still a lot of negativity. There's still a lot of stress, a little more anxiety than you would normally have. And I actually developed the negativity fast for me many years ago because I was angry and I had a bad attitude. And I decided to do something about it. And it worked. And then I liked it so much, I'm still on that same negativity fast. So I've been doing this for years. No television on cable, no news, other than what I get from things that I would say are not politically divisive, like maybe The Economist or things like that, where you're going to get a more balanced view than trying to divide us from each other.
So this negativity fast, did that result in hair loss by any chance?
The drugs took away my hair.
Oh.
But not those drugs.
Not those drugs, yeah. Not the good ones.
Not the illicit drugs. It was the drugs after having 2 brain surgeries. So I was on phenobarbital, which is used to tranquilize elephants. And I can tell you it works quite well for humans. I would drink 64 ounces of coffee and go back to bed.
Wow.
I mean, just like that. It was so bad. I went through about 8 different pharmaceuticals to prevent another seizure, which I've never had another seizure.
Nice.
And then eventually I went to my neurologist and said, I'm going to stop taking these drugs. And she said, you can't stop taking the drugs. You have to wean off over time. And that's what I did. And I've still never had another seizure.
Oh, so superb. George Foreman, I like quotes because they really kind of focus in on what the issue is. Like for him, it was like negativity rolled off my back. That was his superpower. And that's what allowed me to win fights. And it's hard to fight the competition. It's hard to fight the market if the enemy is inside your head. So here's a question for you, Anthony. When that negative voice comes inside your head, is it in your voice or is it another voice?
It's another voice.
Interesting. One of the things I tell people is I am going to how I train them to pay attention to other people, to listen really well, is to repeat whatever the other person is saying. So if I said hello, you'd say hello inside your head, and it once you hear it from me, and then you have to use another channel in your brain to say it yourself and hear that. And half the audience hears my voice in their head, and the other half hear their own voice in their head saying my words. So it's kind of curious how the human mind works.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that's been done on this, and so some of it is a voice that is actually helpful, and some is a voice that's not very helpful. And I think that we're always talking to each other, and some of us, like me, I talk to myself all the time out loud. So like when I'm getting dressed, I'm talking to myself about what I'm doing through the day. And some people don't do that. And I think it's odd that they don't talk to themselves like I talk to myself. But the voice in my head is not my voice. And I know that. It's mostly a composite of society. I mean, that's part of it. Your parents, your teachers, your preachers, all the people that you've been around who have set these boundaries that you shouldn't go past, and or at least in their view. And so a lot of it is not even your voice at all. It's some giant composite of society. And you have to try to work really hard to get out of that. I mean, and that's one way to free yourself from being negative, is not take all that in the first place.
Absolutely. So let's dig down into the topic. What do you think is the root cause of negativity?
Well, at the beginning, you have to understand that if you were to look at evolution, the negativity is what kept us alive. So it is important. A lot of people are like, I never want to be negative. That is not something that you can do. You have something called negativity bias. And so negativity bias means that you are more likely to be negative than positive. And it's even true if something good happens and something bad happens, the bad thing outweighs the good thing. So as much as you want to be positive, I would ask you, if you would think about this, it's your birthday.
Yes.
You get a present, you get a cake, and then that like dissipates like very, very fast, right? Like very fast. You're grateful for the presents. You're grateful for your people being with you. All that stuff's fine, but it goes away really quick. But then let something negative happen. Like you get in a car accident and somebody rear ends you. That stays with you way longer. It stays with you. It takes more brain power to figure out what's going on and how to process those things. And it just keeps going longer than you think. So negativity is in some ways more powerful, but there are a lot of good things about positivity and being optimistic, even though you don't want to be an optimistic caveman thinking that you're going to be okay because you have a lot of threats around you. We still have a lot of our threats around you, but we can move forward towards our goals because we also have a bias to being optimistic. And so we are going back and forth between those things all the time.
So just to add to your metaphor, the birthday party, and I didn't get the present that I wanted, or little Jimmy was a shit during the party. Even though the party was great, there was lots of positives. A lot of people tend to focus on that negative event that outweighs all that positivity that happened in that event. And I agree. A lot of it is genetic in terms of if you didn't pay attention to the rustle of those leaves behind the tree and assume it was a tiger, it was too late. So we're just hot-wired to do that.
Right. Absolutely. That is born into us, and we start that way, and it's been helpful for us. And one of the things that I try to do in this book is to tell people you're allowed to be negative sometimes. Sometimes the events and the things that happen in your life means that you should be negative and you should have that response to it. And pretending like you don't have the problem doesn't do very good as a long-term sort of a approach. So you want to make sure that if you should be negative, you're allowed to be negative. And I didn't want people to think like you just have to be positive all the time. That's not sustainable. You can't do it. You're going to have things that happen in your life. You're going to lose people. You're going to have breakups in relationships. You're going to have all these things. And you're allowed to be negative when it's called for. So I don't want people to think that this is like just be positive thinking.
For sure.
It's not realistic.
And also, just to add to that is, I don't mind somebody hits my car. I'm upset by it. Perfectly fine. Is I go to do a presentation and that voice inside my head goes, they don't want to hear from you. Like they're really important. Like that. That is where negativity meets our ambition and what we want to achieve. So how do you distinguish between the two? One, there's just like a negative state of I'm doom and gloom and nothing's going to work right. The other one is I'm doing okay, but when I go to do those things that bring up fear, one of the ways we handle the fear is have that negative voice come up that basically stops us from doing the thing we're fearful of, and it saves us from the fear, but stops us from building the life we want. So how do you distinguish the two, or how do you articulate the two?
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is a really good conversation to have around this idea. So I have people ask me when I'm getting ready to go on a stage, like, are you nervous? And I'm like, I'm nervous for the audience. I'm not nervous for me. I know what I'm going to say. I've already practiced. I've rehearsed. I've done it a lot of times. But I'm worried about them because I need to be able to transfer this knowledge and experience to them in a perfect way so that they can take something away from it. So I'm worried about them. And so that makes me want to work really harder for them to make sure that I can give them something that's really useful. And so I am always happy to be on the stage. I have no problem doing that. I started playing rock and roll when I was like 15. So I've been on stages for a long time with people who did not want to hear me.
So what's kind of interesting is humans are meaning-making machines. And one of the areas we make meaning is when there's lots of emotion. The emotion could be positive emotion, like I scored the winning goal, and all of a sudden the meaning I make is totally amazing, or I'm a team player, or whatever the meaning I make. And then on the other side is also when something bad happens, is negative emotions, we make meaning out of it. And one isn't better than the other. It's the meaning that we make is the one that counts.
Right.
So what you described was being nervous for the audience. For somebody else might be a useless endeavor, but being nervous going on stage, they interpret it as that's me getting in the right zone. If I'm not nervous before I go on stage, I can't do a good job. And there's other people that make meaning out of it. If I'm feeling nervous, I'm going to stop. This is the worst thing in the entire world. So how do you think we can, one, figure out what meaning we made, and how can we change that meaning? So instead of being something that is limiting, because if you think about it, fear is like the biggest gift in the entire world. When you are at your most fearful state, you are the strongest, the fastest, the best reaction time. But if we don't make the right meaning out of it, it shuts us down. So any advice on how we can change meaning so we can actually use that energy for good as opposed to stopping us?
So the first thing that somebody might want to start thinking about is how they talk to themselves. So whatever that is. So the first thing is when somebody says they're not going to want to hear from me, that's not true. And you know this because you speak. So when you speak, the audience wants you to do well. They want you to entertain them. They want you to tell them the story. They want to get an education about something that would be helpful for them. They are rooting you on. They want you to do that. But if nobody tells you that this is what you should be telling yourself going on, like they're going to love this. This is going to be super helpful for them. They're going to love these stories I'm sharing with them. They're going to find it's going to be amusing to them, but they're going to remember it and they're going to be able to do this. And you can tell yourself whichever one of those lies you want. They're both lies, right? But they hate me. They're not going to like me. That's a lie. You have no idea. There's 500 people in a room. Maybe 50 aren't going to like you. And that would be a good number. Like you don't want everybody to believe what you say is true, right? You want some people to be skeptical. But then when you tell yourself the other lie, they're going to love me. They're going to love these stories. Well, most of them probably will, but some won't, and that's okay, right? But I think what you tell yourself becomes true. So if you believe that they're not going to like you, then you're not going to probably do well because you're carrying that with you. Whether you're walking into a sales call, whether you're walking onto a stage, whether you're walking up as the best man at a wedding and you have to give a speech, like any one of those things, you can go into it believing that this is going to be great and people are going to love it. You'll do better if you have that. And some of it is just how we talk to each other about these things, well, ourselves anyway.
We're going to talk about useful lies in a minute. Let's go to one of our sponsors. We'll be right back. If you're ready to let go of anxiety, let go of uncertainty, let go of doubt, Mindset Boosters gives you the ability to decide how you act and feel in any situation. Ready to take charge of your mindset? Go to mindsetboosters.com. So useful lies are, the way I think of it is this, is that Einstein, brilliant guy, had a model of the world. It was not the truth, but he had a model of the world that was the best model of the world at that time. Some of it was not accurate, but still we developed the cell phone and some amazing technologies, but the model got better as we went along. So if there is no certain truth, then having something that's useful is really important. So oftentimes what you described was useful lies. They want to hear from me. They're going to love me. And if you really hold on to that and believe that, it changes your performance when you go up there and you set the tone for how they perceive you. So we think they have all the control when the reality is we get to set the stage.
Right. I'm on the stage. You're on the stage. So that's a different thing. I'll tell you, I spoke in San Francisco once, and the person who was the MC at the end of this came up to me and he said, there's a guy that said everything that you said was wrong and that none of the things that you said are true at all.
Right.
And he didn't believe one thing that you said. And I said, just one? I usually shoot for at least 10%. I want to alienate some part of them so that they're like, I got to wrestle with this idea that he just shared with me. So I'm okay with that. And then he said, you know this guy. And I said, okay. And I'm supposed, I guess, to ask like who it was.
Oh, please
if
tell
I'm
me.
gonna,
yeah,
like what I'm going to go and try to change his mind. Like there's 500 people there.
Right.
Okay. So that one guy said he didn't believe it. Okay, great. And then he said, he wrote a book. And I said, oh, okay. He goes, you might have seen it. I said, I might have, but I don't really care. Like I did the speech. It's over for me. I enjoyed it. A lot of people enjoyed it. I'm done. Like I don't have to carry any of that. So one guy, if it's 50, if it's 450, what am I going to do? I gave the speech that I gave, right? And anybody who's a speaker knows that you have the speech that you intend to give, the one that you wish you would have given, but the one that you had. So
yeah,
that's
how. Are you
how
sure this guy wasn't the Russian judge on some figure skating kind of competition? Anthony gets a 1 out of 10.
It's fine with me.
There's a guy called well, let's talk ego in a minute because that ties into this negativity. There's a gentleman by the name of Gary Maxwell. It's like a brilliant speaker. And one of the things he had said once was, Umar, if your marketing does not have the ability to offend, it does not have the ability to convince. So if you're not alienating a few folks in your audience, then you're vanilla right down the middle, and that serves no one.
That's exactly right. You have to stand for whatever you stand for. I mean, that's what you have to do. And you just have to be willing to find the useful lie that can help you with these things.
So let's talk ego and negativity. Like in that particular scenario, you could have someone that would hear that one person did not agree with me, and that would destroy their entire afternoon, their entire day, and all the accolades that they get is like, oh, who cares? Like, who is this person? Tell me this person. Why didn't they like it? So talk to me about the relationship of ego and negativity. Is there a correlation?
I can tell you personally, for me, yes, I can tell you that I'm an Enneagram 8. So there are 3 anger types in the Enneagram. The The first one is the perfectionist. They're the most angry people. The second is the Enneagram 8. And then the 9, who's the diplomat, that's also an anger person. So I'm an 8,
Interesting.
which means I have an ego. And because of the way that I grew up and all the trauma that I had in my young life, one of the things that happened to me is I became an 8. And so if you disrespect me, if I feel like you're disrespecting me, if you're trying to take advantage of me, then the fists go up really, really fast for me. I mean, that's what happens. But I've adapted myself to be more like my wife, who is a peacemaker, and I'll be diplomatic, and I won't have to have a conflict because I don't need the conflict anyway. But it's taken years for me to be able to do that, just to walk away from anything without having to worry about the conflict at all. But that's just how you grow. And if you've never taken an Enneagram, it's worth looking at who you are.
So you've met me. I think I'm a 6 or a 7. Best guess?
I don't think you're a 6. So a 6 is somebody who doesn't trust other people. They're
Nope,
very
I trust
skeptical.
people. Oh yeah, I'm not a 6.
A 7 is somebody who, I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. I've got a lot of 7s in my life. My brother is a 7. My other brother is a 7. My son is a 7. I have a whole bunch of 7s in my life. They don't grow up all the way. So
Guilty.
yeah. So yeah, they're more like Peter Pan, and they want to stay where they are, and they're more playful, and they're really enthusiastic about the things that they do, and they bring their whole self to those things. But I would say you're probably not a 6.
Yep,
My mom
definitely a
is
7.
6. So
So there's this in the book, as I was going through it, brilliant, by the way, there was this concept of reframing. Like something happens, we go back to that meaning-making machine that we are.
yeah.
An event happens, we make meaning out of it, and if the meaning is useful to us, hallelujah, but sometimes it isn't. So can you describe a situation and a meaning that maybe one of your clients or you made out of it, and then how you reframed it to get a better outcome?
Yeah, it's important for you to look at whatever happens and then decide what you're going to do with it. So one of my favorite books is called Anti-Fragile: Things That Gain from Disorder. So that's Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who wrote The Black Swan, but Anti-Fragile is a better book by a widest a margin for me. And what it is the way that he described fragility, robustness, and anti-fragility, which he invented that. Well, let's say he found it. Okay, so there was always fragile. Yeah. So, but there, you know what fragile is? If you have a truck,
My ego.
yeah. If you have a truck and you have a box and it's got glass in it and it falls off, it's fragile. It's going to break. All the glass is going to break. But let's say you have cotton swabs in there. It falls off. It's not hurt, but it's not better either. When you're anti-fragile, you actually benefit from disorder. So the way that Taleb says this is that if you're fragile, you're going to break. If you're robust, you're a phoenix. So you can get harmed, but then you come back and you're exactly the same way. Anti-fragile is like a hydra. You cut a head off and I get 2 more heads. So every time you hurt me, I start to get stronger. And so that's the metaphor that I've used since I was a kid. Like the more trauma, the more incidents that I was in, the stronger that I got. And I was able to deal with all my fears. Now, one thing that I said on the stage the first time I ever talked about the negativity fast was people that have cancer will tell you it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And you're like, how could that be true? Like you've been married, you've had children, you've had all these wonderful things that happen. And they're like, nope, cancer. And why is that? Because the transformation of who they became on the other side of that was so different than who they were. So my name is Sam. You know me as Anthony. After I had my brain surgery, I changed my name to Anthony because I was still working for one company and I didn't know if I was going to go back to Los Angeles, but I wasn't allowed because I had to have 2 years without being able to drive a car. So I changed
Wow.
my name to Anthony, and people in my family and my friends all recognized that I was not the same person after having 2 brain surgeries and losing a piece of my temporal right lobe, and without being without being told that that was going to happen.
Wow.
They knew it was going to happen, but they waited until after they did the surgery to tell me we had to cut a piece of your brain off. And then I asked, could I see it? And they said, no, that's morbid. We'll never let you look at it.
Well, which is kind of weird because they give you a gallstone to take home in a jar. So what's kind of interesting to me, Anthony, is we do not use language accidentally. We're very, very purposeful in what we use. So one, there's like the dictionary definition of such. So a good example is remission. So for many survivors of cancer, as they get remission, they get a new outlook on life.
Yeah.
And for me, who's a dreamer and likes useful lies, the question is, did the drugs and the surgery do the trick, or was it a reevaluation of life and they got a new mission in life, and that new mission allowed those drugs to actually function at a higher level? And so the story I'd like to believe, and I is very much that we come near death's door and all the bullshit that we worry about and are concerned about disappears. And then we go, wait a minute, why am I concerned about all this stuff when I should be doing X?
Yeah.
And it could be a noble pursuit, or it just could be I want to be an artist. And when you get that new mission, you start getting better. So where do you fall on that? Is it
after I've done, I mean, at the end of this book, there are dozens and dozens of citations to anything that I claimed. So some of the things that I claimed, I just knew. So when I say you're more likely to be very, very careful with your dogs and cats when you're giving them the prescriptions, and you'll be very, very consistent with that. But you won't do that for yourself. And my editor said, that can't be true. And I said, no, it's true. And she said, how do you know that? I spoke to 600 veterinarians 2 years in a row, and they're like, you're way better with your pets than you are with your own self. And that turns out to be true. And I went out and I got the citations on everything like this. But you can't do the work that I did writing a book like this and reading everything and not believe that what's going on up here has a great deal to do with how you process something like that, like a brain surgery or cancer or something, some other type of trauma. You just can't read it and then think, if just gratitude will lower your blood pressure, will increase your immune system, and do a dozen other things that are all claimed by science and all proven, you can't believe that it's not up here. You can't. I can't anyway.
We're going to go to gratitude because that needs to be kind of plumbed to a deeper level in a moment. But just going back to what you had said about pets' medications versus our own. We were at a car dealer a couple of days ago, Sheena and I, my new bride. And so I was, pretty amazing there. She said, wow, I didn't realize. And I said, yes, if I was buying the car for myself, I would not have been as assertive as I was for you. And you can ask anybody, when you go to buy a car for a friend, what's your personality like versus the other? And you're not mean, but you're just stronger. Hey, man, that's not a good deal. So we do more for others than we do for ourselves. And if you take a look at people coming into basic training in any military in the world, they usually come in as selfish individuals. That process of boot camp basically takes the self away. And when we form a troop, we'll do heroic things, risk our lives for our fellow troop members. We may not risk our lives for the general in the same way, but we'll do for others. And I think that's something amazing about being humans. And also, how can we change that so that we are as kind to ourselves as we would be to somebody else?
Yeah, there's again, a lot of literature, let's call it, on our well-being. and that is your responsibility as your owner of this time that you have here on earth. And I think it's really important that people do some of the things. I mean, gratitude's a really good starting place. So
Yeah.
if you were to look at Marty Seligman's work on positive and flourishing, he created positive psychology. And when he did this, he had an entrepreneur who helped him build a site on a Time magazine thing. So they decided to have people do this one exercise. So if people leave here with just one exercise, this one would be the one I would ask them to do. It's called 3 blessings. So a lot of people know what a gratitude journal is. This is not that. It's something different. So it's not like I love my wife, I love my kids, I love this thing and whatever. I'm grateful for these things. What you do is you make a list at the end of the day of 3 things that went well for you and what caused those things to go well for you. And what happens if you do that for 2 weeks, for about 6 months, you will not have any depression. And what Seligman said in a book called Hope Circuit, which is his biography, is that it's more powerful than psychoanalysis or pharmaceuticals. So this has been proven, it's scientifically been proven, but some of us just sort of know that it's all going on up here.
So re-articulate, what do you do for the blessing?
What went
The
well?
3 blessings? Do you just think about the 3 blessings?
No, you write them down. So you write down like what went well and why. And if you do that for 2 weeks, the people who are depressed are no longer depressed. If they were anxious and stressed, all those things go down. It's amazing.
So here's something that's kind of interesting is the gratitude journal. A lot of people do it. So let me ask you a question, Anthony. When you were on stage in Las Vegas, visiting there, what's one thing you were grateful for in that experience?
I was grateful that I got the opportunity to share something with people who actually were trying to pick it up. And I had a lot of people that came up later on and said, that was really good. That really helped me understand this thing better. So I'm grateful that I get an opportunity to even do something like that. I mean, it always feels good to me, and I'm always grateful.
So that's what most people do is say, I'm grateful for this. I came across this thing where it was adding the word because at the end of it, which was, if you did that same thing, I'm grateful I got to share some important ideas with a receptive audience. And then if you answered the because part, what's the because part? Because that's where the juice is. That's where the energy is.
Well, I can go back to the 3 blessings. So
yeah,
I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that. And why did it go well for me is because I always feel good helping other people see something that they can't see. So that's what I spend most of my time. It's like trying to show people something that it's invisible to them, but visible to me. And it's only visible to me because I go out and I seek people who can see something that I can't see. So if they can see it and I can't see it, then I really am going to be interested in seeing that. Because if you can see it and I can't see it, then I want to know, like, how did you learn to see that? So one of my mentors is a guy named Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber created something called integral theory. And basically he takes the whole universe and puts it into 4 quadrants. And it's a structure that's incredibly powerful. And as soon as I listen to a book, you can't read this book because it's not a book. It's an audible book. It's called Cosmic Consciousness, Cosmic with a K, and it's Ken Wilber. And you would want to listen to that before you ever read a book, because you won't get how lightly he takes this big idea and his sense of humor. You would never get his sense of humor out of the book. You'd be like, what is he talking about?
Right.
But if you listen to it, and I wanted to see what Ken can see. So I forced myself on Ken. I kept asking to come and meet with him. And then he spent maybe 5 or 6 days with me over a number of years. And he helped me understand how he learned what he learned and how I could see it better. And so anything like that for me is really helpful. So the because for me is I want to share what I can see with other people so they can see it. That's what
Love
I think
that.
I'm supposed to be doing here.
So outline for me, what is the negativity fast, and what's the process of getting that done?
I will tell you how I did it. And I don't think that there's one way to do this, but
Mm.
the first thing that I did was I got rid of everything political. Now, I went to college after my brain surgery. I graduated summa cum laude with a 4.0 in
Wowzers.
political science, and I had a 4.0 in English literature. I had a 3.93 grade point average. So I did pretty well there. And then I had a counselor that said, you should take the LSAT. And I said I would if I knew what that was.
Mm.
And he said, it's the law school entrance exam. And he said, I think you'd be good at it. I got a 161 on that out of 170. And then I got the Dean's Academic Scholarship to law school, which
Hello, Mr.
seems like a
Mensa.
good idea at the time, but it was even more political than political science. I mean, it
Mm.
was constant arguing about politics, and everything got so political to me. What I decided to do, I was angry for a whole bunch of reasons. And what I decided to do was I'm going to get rid of all politics. So I took all my books to Half Price Books. I took all the magazines. I turned off cable television altogether. Like there's no news for me. I've still not ever gone back to watch any cable news shows. None.
So,
Uh,
Anthony, did you notice that the world did not end when you stopped watching that?
the world got a lot better. And it was
For
it's a
you, but I mean,
nicer.
just generally, we have this sense of if I'm not keeping an eye on it, the world's going to explode. But no, if you stop doing it, it still goes on.
It goes
Happily
on
without
without
you.
you. And my wife is still mad at me just about every day. So she'll say, did you see that story today? And I'm like, nope. It happened without me knowing. And I'm still fine. And somebody like you is going to tell me that something happened. And I'm still not going to be able to do anything about it. There's a hot war in Europe. Have you done anything about it yet? I haven't. Like, I don't know. What are we
Yep.
supposed to do about these things? So you can just pile that on day after day. So no cable, no newspapers. The only thing I get is The Economist because it's tame enough for me to read it without it being politically divisive. Then I got rid of people in my life for the second time. That was the second time I removed people from my life because of who they were.
Right.
And there are some people you have to distance yourself from if you want to grow in a positive way. So the first time I had people who were coming who were bad influences, and at 19 I would not tolerate that anymore. At 19 I was like, nope, can't hang out with you, I'm done. And then at that time when I started doing the negativity fast for the first time, I had to remove some people who were just negative. And it's hard to do that. And it's people that you may love and they are in your life, but you just can't spend a lot of time with them because they're so negative. And if you hang around with people who are negative, they will turn you negative, but you will not turn them positive. The negativity is stronger than the positivity until that person makes the choice on their own that they're going to give it up. And you can't make them do it. You can try to help them do it, but a lot of people live there. And you probably know people in your life that live there. Anything that's negative to you, whether it is something like geopolitics and you're really into it, you just have to drop it. And what will happen to you if you do that, you will start to feel better every single day. And if you can get rid of the news and you don't have to sit on the internet and look for things that are negative, because Twitter is going to show you every negative thing that it can. Facebook's going to see a bunch of people arguing, even with their parents. I've watched
Right.
people unfriend their mom and dad over politics. You're
Yep.
like, that's not a good decision to make. So I think everything that's negative to you, if it's a trigger for you, try to remove it. Just try to remove that and get as many of them as you can out of your way, and you will start to feel a lot better. I am more positive more of the time. It's not that I don't have negative times. I do, but they don't last as long because I'm more positive more of the time. And I think it's only because I remove so many sources that it doesn't feel the same way. If somebody's watching Fox or they're watching MSNBC every night, they're going to be, what they're being done is they're being fed fears that will cause them to think that their neighbors are their enemies. Not a good thing for us to do. This political divisiveness is not good.
Absolutely. So, Anthony, before we part company, I like to play a game sometimes. It's let's get some tips that are easy to execute to lose the negativity. And I figured I'll let you go first. I'll go second, and we'll go till we run out, and maybe we help a few people out. What would be the first tip you would give? Even if you've given it before, let's do it in the speed round again.
Okay. So the first thing I would do is I would go to my younger brother, Jake, who's a comedian, and he drives long distances. And he used to be really, really unhappy with how people drive.
Mm.
And then at one point, he looked in another car as a guy was trying to run in front of him. And he realized this guy needs to get to a rest stop.
Mm.
And that's what he lied to himself about. And he thought this person needs help. And he's like, go. And he's just like, get in front of me, go. Now, he had no idea if that guy really had to go to the bathroom or not.
He just knew it wasn't pissing him off anymore.
Yeah. So when he told me that story, I'm like, that's a great story. Like, you can believe whatever you want and you can have the empathy for that person. Even if you're wrong, you can't really be wrong, right? So that's the first thing I would say.
Cool. That's a brilliant one, actually. One for me is just awareness. Like when we are being negative or those thoughts come up, just training yourself to just notice it, because it happens so subtly that oftentimes you don't. And sometimes your outside behavior shows it. And that's why God invented spouses, to just give you a signal. Could be subtle that, hey, you're doing this. And when you are aware of it, notice the feelings in your body. Like, what am I feeling when I've got this thought? And then after a while, your mind will just go, feeling that feeling, I must be going negative, and just check in. So just knowing it's happening is really useful.
I would add to that, write down the negativity that you're experiencing. So one of the things that you can do with a mindfulness practice, or if you do any kind of meditation, you can do this, because this is really what you're supposed to be doing. I've studied with 2 Zen masters, and both of them explained to me that I wasn't meditating. So they helped me with that. But here's what happens. If you take it out of your brain and your body and you put it on paper, so you write it down, it's not in here anymore. Now you put it out there. So now it's an object. You're not the object or the subject. You're just looking at it. And if you can just look at it, the distance helps you feel a whole lot better. So that's one of the things that I recommend for people. Write it all down. And then if there's something you can do about something, write down, I can do this tomorrow. And if you can't do something about it, you just got to let it go. Like, you just say, I'm letting that go because I can't do anything about it.
I love that.
You'll feel better.
So we've had a really nice conversation today. And had you come to this interview with me, this conversation, with love in your heart, not necessarily for me, but just feeling that feeling of love, how do you think it would have changed our interaction today?
If we were negative?
No. If you had love in your heart, like you came, you're like, we know each other, we like each other, and it was a very nice conversation. But if I came to this interview with love in my heart, I would have listened more than I did. I would have shared more, maybe one of my stories. So one of the things to combat negativity, when I look back at all the times where I screwed up or other people screwed me over, and the way I reacted, when I think back, how could I have changed that? The thought always comes, if I had love in my heart at that moment, I would have been more generous with them, even if they were the villains, or I would have been more patient with myself, even if I was the bad guy. So I think having love in your heart is really, really useful in combating all of this.
I think that you can call it love.
Mm-hmm.
You can call it empathy. You can call it compassion if you actually are willing to do something to help another human being. I think that all of those things are really, really important, especially right now where we are. And I do think that I try to come, because I'm an 8, and so I've done a lot of work to figure out like how to be a better 8. Because an 8, Eights get most of the things done in the world. So I will give you some people who are eights. Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, Fidel Castro, Saddam Hussein, Anthony Iannarino. I'm an eight. So there's some of us that do really good work because we do care and we do have that love, and some of it is protecting other people. So an Enneagram 8 is a challenger, or it's sometimes called the protector. So if somebody's being bullied or harmed, I will intervene because I have the power to intervene. But I always try to come with love in my heart. And I always want to be a better version of me. And it's not always easy to do. There are some people that can just trigger you, but you have to figure out, how am I going to respond to this? And when you respond with empathy or compassion, if they're doing something that you don't understand and you think that it's wrong, you just have to understand they don't have the resources or the experience to know to do something different. And you have to look at it through that lens rather than saying that's a horrible person, because all of us have the same capacity to be a horrible person under certain circumstances.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you would want that empathy too, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, for sure. So Anthony, thank you so much for being with us. Is there any parting words you want to share? Any last nugget of wisdom?
No, I just want to say I'm grateful for you having me on, and I'm grateful that we got to meet each other face to face in Vegas.
Absolutely.
That was one of my highlights.
Oh, brilliant. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. I'm going to do the outro. So stay tuned. It's a scary thought, but on Halloween Eve, Anthony's releasing his book, The Negativity Fast. We're going to put a link in the show notes so you can go pre-order it, and all of Anthony's social media handles. And if you don't know, Anthony has written over 5,000 blog posts because he wants to share his wisdom with the world. Thank you so much for being on the show, and chat in just a few minutes on the other side. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. And if you're looking for more tools, go to my website at NoLimitSelling.com. I've got a free mind training course there that's going to teach you some insights from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the fastest way to get better results.